Welcome to the Raisina Ideas Pod. My name is Ashok Malik. I'm chair and partner at the Asia Group, a business consultancy based here in New Delhi. We're here to discuss the Pacific Blues, our focus on the Pacific Island countries, a very important region in our broader Indo-Pacific. I have three excellent guests with me. In no particular order, Admiral Karambir Singh, chairman of the National Maritime Foundation and a doyen of the Indian Navy. Dulciana Somare Brash, a development specialist from Papua New Guinea, from DevCom Pacific, and I understand the first person or delegate from Papua New Guinea to come to any Raisina Dialogue. Welcome. We're glad you're here. We hope you come again. And finally, an old friend of India and the Raisina Dialogue, Bassi, Executive Director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, who's been here in previous roles, in previous incarnations, and welcome back as well. So let me start with the start of the show today, the delegate from Papua New Guinea. Dulciana, you come from a region, from a country and a region, Papua New Guinea and the Pacific Island countries, that is becoming increasingly very important strategically, but also in terms of the focus on its developmental and economic challenges, and of course opportunities. How do you see this dual opportunity and challenge? The external situation, which is more and more major powers, great powers, Australia, of course, India, China, the US, are more and more interested in your region, which can throw up opportunities and problems. Second, your internal mechanisms, your internal systems, economic capacity building, developmental challenges, political institution building, remain a work in progress. So how do you square this circle?
Thank you, Ashok. We're almost 50 years we're almost arriving at 50 years of independence through various processes of internal change. Our greatest issue in Papua New Guinea that needs to be signposted, I guess, is our political instability. We have institutional challenges, major reform challenges. I guess the point I'm making is that until such time as our partners and our friends, private and public, acknowledge that we do have challenges that we should be working together with, focusing on how we bring our institutions up to 2023 by way of respecting data, by way of acknowledging the importance of the rule of law, by acknowledging that we are a resource-rich nation and very, very different to other Pacific Island nations. We have great opportunities that were provided through the pandemic period. Certainly the challenges that we face very specifically to our internal revenue has been the war in Ukraine, which has given us an opportunity to focus on our own petroleum sector. We're a big provider and source of LNG in our region, so liquefied natural gas and potentially petroleum products. We have major extractives in the mineral sector and, of course, in the agricultural sector. So we've got a neon sign on our head, basically, that says, pick us. And I think that the focus for us needs to be an acknowledgement that we have a booming population, a burgeoning youth population, a population growing at perhaps 3.8%. I mean, I think recently the United Nations has placed us at about 17 million people. But in the absence of data and in the absence of processes that are our recurrent processes of population, basically checking on our statistics of population, our census, our household and expenditure surveys, and so very technical processes that have to be respected and acknowledged so that we can be a respectable player in this time of great geopolitical interest to the world.
There's so much you've packed in there which resonates with audiences in India. Just in democratic and pluralist institution building, sustainable use and exploitation of resources, building for the future for a young population. These are values India and Australia share. These are, quite frankly, quad values which we'd like to take to other countries. The Pacific Island countries have traditionally looked to Australia for sustenance and support because you are the big power there. Do you see value in working with India in that part of the world, or would you rather not have India around? After all, India does believe some of its developmental experiences, being a developing country itself, would perhaps be more relevant to the Pacific Island countries than perhaps something from a model from a developed country such as Australia. That's our belief here. Is that shared in Australia? Would you want us to work with you, or would you rather we didn't come there?
Well, the short and absolute answer, Ashok, is yes. There have been, over the last few years, an increased number of countries looking to strengthen their partnerships with Pacific Island countries, and that is inherently a good thing. India's increased interest in the Pacific, as shown, for example, by Minister Jaishankar's recent trip to Fiji, is wholly positive, and it's music to Australia's ears, and should be of absolute benefit to the Pacific. Yes, traditional partners like Australia have some advantages in engaging with the Pacific. We have strong historical and cultural connections. We've got enduring security relationships. But there shouldn't be a view that the older traditional relationships are the only way to go. And when you have in India a democratic country that shares many of the values and interests that Australia shares, that the Pacific shares, it just makes sense for countries like Australia and India to work together. For a long time, Australia has been working with partners like the US and Japan in the Pacific, so it does make sense to make as many of those initiatives and partnerships Quad-based, not just Australia, US and Japan. There's also, of course, other Pacific powers like France that both Australia and India have great relationships and friendships with. So there are multiple opportunities there. And I think with India's inclusive approach, particularly as they are this year they hold the presidency of the G20, it means that as India seeks to bring the Global South's voice to the fore, there's a real opportunity for the Pacific to maximise choice, and it's maximising their own choice, their own agency, and being able to help explain to countries like Australia and India what is in their interests. And above all, India increasing its understanding of the Pacific, just as Australia increases its understanding of the Indian Ocean countries, can only be a good thing for the entire region.
Great. Admiral Singh, if I could move to India's broader maritime strategy, the Indo-Pacific maritime strategy, if you will, which has many aspects. There's traditional security, there's non-traditional security, which includes HADR. Where do the Pacific Islands countries fit in, if they do at all?
Thank you so much. The Pacific Island countries are an integral part of India's maritime strategy, because if you look at the enunciation of Sagar, security and growth for all in the region, it basically is on the pillars of a rules-based international order, having a free and open and prosperous Indo-Pacific. And all these are meant to establish the fact that all countries must rise with the rising tide. And, there should be a voice for everybody. That's why when you talk about, rules-based order, if you have a rules-based order, you have a kind of predictability in the oceans which are carrying all your commerce. So the maritime strategy completely fits into for the Pacific Island nations. And when you try to operationalize Sagar, we have the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, and we have 7 pillars. If we did a comparison of the 7 pillars of IPOI and the 7 interconnected, thematic themes of the Blue Pacific strategy, there's almost complete alignment in that. So India doesn't rest there just because by making these statements. They've also under the president, when we were the president of the UN Security Council, there again, when the Prime Minister went there in 2021, we issued a certain paper on what should be our idea of maritime security. There again, all these issues which I've spoken about, which are very, very close to the heart of the Pacific Island nations, have all been enunciated. And of course, we have under the Indo-Pacific Island Developing States Leaders Meet, there's been an outreach. Through the FIPIC, there's been an outreach. So all in all, there is a lot of congruence between India's maritime strategy and what the Pacific Islands hold close to them. Thank you.
Dulciana, if I could ask you to get more granular, in a few months this summer, Prime Minister Modi will be traveling to your country for the forum, the summit of the Forum of India Pacific Island Countries, FIPIC as it's called. Given that much has happened since the last FIPIC summit, the world has changed in some senses. There's much more attention in the Pacific Island states. This is a moment of opportunity, quite frankly, for the countries there to, as per their priorities, maximize their choices, to use Justin's words. What are your hopes from India before this summit or at this summit?
We have, since COVID has happened, since huge geopolitical pivots in our region, particularly with the presence or the amped up presence of the United States and certainly China. We've had to recover significantly from climate disasters. Sorry, I have to say that I don't represent a government or any group. These are my personal opinions.
That's even better.
Yes. But we have many issues that require attention all at once. And when you look at the size of our economy, I think we're about 24 billion kina, which is probably the equivalent of about 15 billion Australian dollars. We ought to be probably a double trillion economy, given all of our natural resources. When we look at our economy, we have to understand what the institutional roadblocks are. And I think the importance of partnering with India or being brought into sharp contrast by a major democracy like India, we have a special opportunity now to look at some nuts and bolt issues like the importance of technology, the biometrics that can run our population census, that can run our electoral processes, that just look at the everyday recurrent operations of our government. Development budget very separate from our recurrent spend in the country. I hope that the conversations that will take place will really acknowledge our broken supply chains. While we are an petroleum-producing country, we haven't been able to diversify industry in the way in which our people require, so that the benefit-sharing arrangements, according to the enabling environment and the legislative places and the prioritisation of policy internally for ourselves as a nation, but also our partnership arrangements and in what order we place and how we prioritise investments, particularly in critical infrastructure that look at technology, that understand the importance of energy. To basically, I think the importance for me personally, for India, is how we get to dropping 40 cents per kilowatt hour down to about 9 cents per kilowatt hour in this energy transition that is so important for the rest of the world, but for us very, very significant. I think there are climate issues. We're at the coalface very much of these conversations where rising sea levels, I come from estuary and mangrove ecosystems, very, very delicate. So you take one link out of the chain and 40,000 years of our existence immediately becomes confusing to ourselves. So I hope that the conversations that take place at this important forum can be linked up to future conversations with prominence given to the fact that we are attempting to tinker our own systems. We are incredibly diverse, and we have to sustain our populations. And I'll just make another point. We had a general election recently. I think the importance of our donors, our friends, the international community, and certainly private investors, of acknowledging that we have to be able to roll out our electoral processes and other primary processes that actually say to the rest of the world, we are open for business, but we do respect the rule of law. Because otherwise our friends next door will inherit our social problems.
When you have many friends,
yes,
many friends next door. What you're saying makes complete sense, because there's so many ways in which I think India and the Pacific Island countries can cooperate. Skilling for young people, certainly. Yes. Sustainable development. One of our institution building, democratic institution building, working with the Election Commission, which is something we've done successfully with many partner countries, and Of course, one of Prime Minister Modi's key international initiatives has been the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, and there's a clear synergy between its goals and those of the Pacific Island countries. Moving to you, Justin, before I go back to Admiral Singh for essentially the same question. The Indo-Pacific is a vast space. It extends from, on calculation, from the eastern coast of Africa to the west coast of America, but more realistic perhaps from Sydney to Africa. There are doubting Thomases in both our systems, in the Indian system and the Australian system, who wonder whether this composite region is really connected. In your country, there are people who'd rather focus on the Pacific Island countries and not focus on the Indian Ocean countries, the Indian Ocean island states, and they see them as separate. In our country, too, we have skeptics. How do we overcome these skeptics? Or do you think these skeptics still have a significant voice? Or are people recognizing the natural connections between the challenges and the opportunities in the Indian Ocean island countries and the Pacific Island countries?
It's a great question, Ashok, and I think the answer lies in what was just a fabulous set of remarks by Dulciana in terms of what is happening in the Pacific, what the Pacific Island countries are trying to do themselves with the support of partner countries. I think there are fewer and fewer skeptics, Ashok, in terms of why it's in Australia's interest that we have a very stable, secure, prosperous, sovereign Pacific region. And in part it goes to some of the issues that Dulciana mentioned, particularly technology, that the interconnectedness of the world, which has increased, the interconnectedness which has increased so greatly, really does mean that an issue that is impacting one region has flow-on effects to others. And I think we've all realised recently, in terms of Australia and India, that the challenges that India sees within the Indian Ocean region and the challenges and opportunities that are in the Pacific region are very, very similar. All the countries in both regions are after economic development and prosperity, and so it is in Australia and India's interests, along with many of our partners, Quad partners, France, as I mentioned, and others, to work together in partnership on issues from infrastructure development that Dulciana mentioned, and importantly, there should always be scrutiny on the quality of the infrastructure and equipment, so that we don't leave countries, whether it be in the Indian Ocean region or the Pacific, burdened with what is left. But also working on areas such as better water and sanitation, all focused on the economic opportunities that are there. I do think that technology means that we all need to recognise that working together across the entire Indo-Pacific is in all our interests. And so I do think that there are fewer skeptics, and the more that Australia and India, Quad partners, can work together, the better.
The technology point you make is very well taken, because India's digital experiences in particular have shown that developing countries can actually use technology as a force multiplier to overcome traditional barriers. My final question to you, Admiral Singh, the Indian Navy was an early advocate and pioneer of the interconnectedness of the Indo-Pacific, when other parts of the system, frankly, were not as enthusiastic. Now the other parts seem to have caught up. Have they caught up enough, or are there still concerns?
Sometimes, when people ask what is the interconnectedness of the Indian Ocean region and the Pacific, we answer plain and simple answers. You please ask the fish, and they can move from either place. So, having said that, the problems that we face with our island nations face in the Indian Ocean region and what the Pacific Island nation countries face are pretty similar. We have a very large water content, more than 90% water, huge EEZs, lack of capacity to patrol them, the problems of IUU fishing, rising sea levels. These are across the board. And we have, as an Indian Navy, we've got a pretty fair experience on capacity building and capability enhancement in the Indian Ocean region. And therefore, whenever I speak to the Australians, one is that I try and give our perspective on what are the problems and challenges that we faced and pick up best practices from the Australian experience or the Pacific Island nation experience. For example, they've got a very vibrant fisheries control mechanism, which we don't have in the Indian Ocean region. So the problems are same. The lessons that we've learned over a period of time is one is that when you talk of capacity building and capability, capacity and building and capability enhancement, there are two pillars I think which they rest on. One is that you have to be credible. I mean, you make a promise, then you don't waste too much time putting it into effect. And second is you customize based on the requirement of the problems that are faced by that island nation. So this is one thing that we've learned. Talk the language of development rather than contestation, because it doesn't appeal. Because the maritime security or security has got very large. The concept of security is not only geopolitics, but it's the economic and the prosperity of the people. That is what we have to focus on. Rules-based order is very comforting to smaller island nations, because that gives the kind of the atmosphere wherein you can progress commerce and unhindered. Multilateral institutions are extremely important, because then you have the idea that everybody has an equal vote. So these are things I think we should work on, and very importantly, our high-level visits must happen. Our Prime Minister Modi visited Seychelles after more than 20 years. Similarly, I think Mr. Blinken has gone to the Pacific Islands after about close to 30 years.
My God.
So this engagement has to be there to make all the island nations feel that they are very much part of the larger global order. Thank you.
It's not just political level visits. I guess all of us need to go to the Pacific Island. Maybe we'll have the next Raisina there. Just a thought. Thank you so much, Admiral Singh. Thank you so much, Dulciana, Brash. Thank you so much, Justin Bassi. That's all we have. Thank you so much.